Yes, can you hear me now?
Yes, sir. All right, I'm not going to try those headphones anymore. Okay, now we can start. This thing is recording. Good morning, good afternoon, Stuart. How are you? What's on your
I'm
mind,
doing
sir?
wonderful. I just typed in the chat. I was just wondering about your reaction or your take on the playing of Uncle Dave Macon. I mean, that's an incredible style.
Yeah, I mean, Uncle Dave, it seems like he played multiple styles.
Yeah.
He had a lot going on. When I was a kid, I had probably like a 6-disc set of his, and just listen to all that stuff. I was really more interested in more rougher field recordings and stuff. And it seems like everything they ever recorded of Uncle Dave was like a studio recording.
Yeah.
And there is some live there. I think there's some live recordings. I know I've seen live video of him when he was on Grand Ole Opry like one time or something. So it would have probably been a very different experience to see a performer like Uncle Dave in person versus the recording, right? And I don't want to have like the sort of a cookie cutter take on like on who he was or anything like that. I don't know, but his playing's obviously great, and he could use several different styles. He could down pick and 3-finger pick, 4-finger pick, and he had all the tricks and stuff. Man, it's really amazing stuff. But I never really like learned anything from him. I never sat and broke down any of his stuff and tried to emulate anything that he ever did. So that's somebody that is kind of overlooked for me, because I kind of just, as a kid, I said, oh, these are commercial recordings, and I listened to them and stuff, and kind of just was like put them to the side. I was always really into the field recordings, and most of that stuff is like 1930s and onward when they started doing field recording projects.
Yeah.
So my sampling is probably a little biased in that regard. I don't know. But yeah, Uncle Dave, one of the greats. I'm gonna try to pull somebody else up here. Thank you. Let me go back up here. Headphones are too fancy. Yeah. Wish there was a way. Starting out, up picking. Okay. Let me find you, JC.
Hello, that's me.
Okay, awesome. Y'all help me out here. Cool. So you got a question, up picking.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm literally, I think I'm the most beginner we got. And so I'm just starting with the up picking in your 2 styles video, because the down picking is harder for me. So I'm starting with the up picking, and I'm just trying to get the rhythm, because I am rhythm impaired. So basically I just need like a check-in, and like tell me what to fix, and then where I go next if it sounds reasonable.
Yeah, sounds good.
Okay, let me I'm going to turn off video, because I'm literally in my car at work, and so you'll just like see the ceiling or something, because I can't hold it.
Let's take a listen.
Okay, let me see if I can not embarrass myself here.
And can I just ask everybody else to make sure your microphone is muted so that we can hear whoever's talking? I hear some interference.
Yeah, if you again, if you touch the screen, at least on Android, you get the whole menu at the bottom, and one of them is the mute video, and
somebody's bouncing around somewhere.
Okay, let me see if I can get this here. Boom chicka here, yeah. Oops. So is that like a boom? Is that like boom, something like the boom chicka, or is it?
I can hear a boom chicka, boom chicka, boom chicka, boom chicka.
Okay.
That's all you're going for. Is it okay? Yeah, let me let you speak. Is there anything specifically that's?
Well, no, it's just like as long as I'm thinking boom chicka in my head, it's okay. Otherwise, I get like or whatever. It's. But I can get that rhythm if I'm kind of thinking about it. So this is all right hand, right? And I'm just doing that, melody that you suggested, because it's super simple. So what if I feel like I'm not, an orangutan with that anymore? where do I go? Do I like start trying to fret, or do I try like different sequences of just the open strings to try to get it into a groove? Or
yeah, if you want to, do just like some bare bones, like exercises and practices. Probably, okay, so first of all, I should preface that by saying I never did like exercises and just practice rolls and licks and stuff like that. I just would, at your point, when I got to your point where I could actually create, a dependable boom chick boom chick rhythm.
Yep.
I just began learning my first tune.
Okay.
So that's one way you could do it, because when you're learning your first, if you just go and start learning the material,
Okay.
jump right in, you're going to be doing all those exercises anyhow. But at the same time, if you want some, like you're doing like the my dog has fleas, boom chicka boom chicka boom chicka boom chicka, walking it back and forth, you're comfortable with that. You can start put a let me see if I can handle all these chords.
Like an unadorned something from the tabs.
Like if you're in standard G tuning, the bass string sounds nice, fretted at the second fret. So you could then do, fret something and then get a, and then try to make some kind of chord.
Mm-hmm.
So forth. And it's just, if you're just at that stage, and it's just a matter of repetition for you. And also you can't get enough my dogs have fleas, boom chicka boom chicka boom chicka. You can't really do that too much. So
because the only other experience I have is bass, and there's no real overriding rhythm like that. It's all, they're all different. So all right, so I'll just keep doing that then. Thank you very much. That's basically what I needed to know. I will check in next week.
Yes, sir. And another thing I'll say, JC, is it's not like there's just one overriding rhythm. That's the rhythm that we use most. But you'll find there's plenty of opportunities to where it might be just there's like a boom chick, boom chick, boom chick. You'll hear me slip into that, and you'll hear the like a booma chicka. So that's just as many as you can kind of fit into that 4-beat framework. Anyhow, blah, blah, blah. So I'm going to go over other folks. Okay. Philosophical question regarding the songster method from Jamie. I see you, sir. I'm going to pin
Yes, sir.
You. Okay.
Hey, Cliff. Thanks for doing this again. So, I'm a relative beginner, guitar background. And I've done country blues in the past where, you're studying the tablature and you're trying to play like Blind Lemon Jefferson, note for note, et cetera, et cetera. And it's clear to me that this is not your philosophical approach to playing. Mm-hmm. You don't want a bunch of tab monkeys out here playing tablature, all sounding robotic and sounding the same. It's very clear. But as I approach it, and I'm trying to learn, like I'm on my second song, like playing Beaver Dam Road, for example. I've been trying really hard to not just study tab and to sit there and stare at a piece of paper while I'm playing, trying not to do that. So watching your videos and watching your left hand, but I guess my philosophical question is this: my playing is very limited. My skill set, so to speak, on the banjo. But what I find myself doing is I'll just start playing the skeleton, the structure of the song, and now it sounds. And then I go back and listen to you, and it sounds completely different. It doesn't sound anything like what you're intending. It sounds like music, right? But it doesn't. And I mean the technique. I mean sometimes I do a little bit of 2-finger picking, and then I'll kind of do a couple strum brushes, and I'm just kind of doing my own thing. Now, how important is it to learn, the song to the utmost ability versus just branching off and doing your own thing? Is there like a bar that because I want it to sound authentic. I mean, I want it to sound in the style, because that's what we're all kind of trying to do.
Sure.
But at what point do I become me? Does that make sense?
We each of us has to figure that out for ourselves at some point. But you mentioned something that caught my ear, which I'll respond to right off the bat, which is that you say, so you try to reduce something to the bare bones of the song, and then you say that it's unrecognizable, or something like that. So, correct. Well, my thing then is that maybe that doesn't quite sound like what we want to do, but potentially could be okay, because so that gets back to sort of like a songster method rule, right? In that, can you sing the song to it? You know, if you can still sing the song to it, that's what as long as you have the melody in your head and you have the words in your head, and that's very important for me. That's like the nature of the tune that you're trying to play. That's, I don't know, it's like it's like the barcode of it. You got to at least have that. So if you can hum the melody and you can sing to it and you can sing it, then I don't understand how it's unrecognizable. Can you explain that?
Yeah, I mean, I guess what I'm saying is maybe I'm playing a little bit different. The tempo obviously is going to be a little bit slower. Everything's going to be as we're learning the techniques. Yeah. But my concern is if I just get to the point where I can sing along and I can pick out the melody, and that I'm missing I'm missing opportunities to learn valuable techniques, and that it would be self-limiting, if that makes sense.
So help me a little bit more. Self-limiting how?
Self-limiting in the sense that, is if a song has a certain technique that is demonstrated in that song, whether it's a roll or a certain chord structure or a certain technique that's introduced in a certain song, and I'm just racing to be able to sing the song, I'm self-limiting myself. I'm not learning the more advanced techniques.
You can always go back and incorporate those into it. Yeah. I see what you mean. There's like little stylistic elements in a tune, like where you might have an instrumental break,
right,
and then go back into singing and so forth. I mean, yeah, you want to do homage to stuff like, I always do a tip of the hat to whoever I learned the recording from, ideally from a living person that I knew, but boy, that's scarce, usually from a recording. But you get a lot of character through the recording, and I try to do a tip of the hat to that. Don't neglect anything like that. I don't know. Right. I have a hell of a time even navigating your problem there. It's kind of like, it's just however, to the extent you want to do things like that. But it sounds to me like I don't know, I would think you're overthinking it, right? Like you seem to me like you're very familiar with a lot of traditional music. You come from a traditional guitar background. You've researched and studied that for a long time, it sounds like. I think you're okay. I think you're coming from the right place, going in the right direction. I wouldn't worry too much about stuff like this.
And I'll just follow one thing, and I'll give the floor up. I don't want to hog everybody's time, but like in use blues for an example. There's people out there that, man, if you don't play the note for note, then you don't quote unquote get it. And it sounds to me like you're not of that school.
Yeah, well, and also the people that they're copying note for note were not of that school. I can't think of any traditional, like a blues man or woman, like guitarist, any of them who would expect or inflict such a rule on anyone. In reality, it's crazy. I don't want to, but there's a lot of like stuff is really being flipped on its head a lot of times right now, like culturally. And one thing that's been flipped on its head in our little pocket of the culture is people saying, if you don't play it note for note the way this person did, you're wrong. But that's actually opposite of the tradition. That person that you're copying note for note and generally they scorned people who copied their music. Or they maybe didn't, but when they were coming up, you were scorned. If you played something note for note like anybody else, that wasn't something that you strived for. you wanted to have your own version of stuff. That's true in George Gibson's youth in Knott County, Kentucky. I know that's true of a lot of the blues guitarists, because that's in the literature, that's out there, that they, who was it, Junior Kimbrough, I think, boasted that he didn't even boast this, but he never did play anybody else's music. He never played a cover. He only played his own. And that's not a unique mentality. He's pretty extreme, but a lot of guys and gals and whoever playing this music, they scorned and held in contempt the idea of playing something note for note the way anybody else did. And so I try to inflict some of that culture on y'all in anything that I do, whether it's on Patreon or whatever, or here or YouTube or in person. Try to make sure that people know, like, this is the tradition that we're trying to be a part of, that we think is cool and that we're into, is a tradition where you don't copy. It's kind of like, well, why would you do that? It's kind of tragic. It's a shame in a way. But at the same time, I also see the value now of copying people note for note. I mean, if somebody is a really historic example of a style, I really do appreciate when I see somebody copy somebody note for note, when it's laid out and it's understood and there's a context, hey, I'm about to copy somebody else note for note because they're a historical person. Examples of that, you have like two people I can think of off the top of my head, Mike Seeger and Art Rosenbaum, two guys that I personally know. Mike, of course, has been dead for a while, but those guys both could do an imitation of Roscoe Holcomb that was pretty close to a copy. They both of those guys, like, they have a high-pitched singing voice, and they can both copy Roscoe's picking style almost perfect. And I've actually seen Art Rosenbaum do it in his living room, and you're like, whoa, he's really kind of close. Like, that's a good copy, But when Art's picking the banjo for fun around his friends, he sounds like nobody but Art Rosenbaum, for example. Two other things that came to my mind while I was just blabbering about that. George Gibson told me a story that somebody told him indirectly about Kyle Creed. And the first time Kyle Creed was ever taken to, I believe it's Galax, the big Galax festival. And everybody, it was like 1970 or something. And Kyle Creed's, overhand round peak style was all the rage, still is. And he complained that everywhere he went, he heard himself playing. So everywhere he went, he could hear himself playing back, in his ears all over the festival, and it disturbed him. That's one example of one old timer tradition bearer who kind of thought it was weird that people copied him note for note. There's lots of other examples. Somebody else just told me another story about one of those old timer tradition bearers kind of saying the same thing, like, who was it? It was like, Tommy Jarrell or somebody, and was like, damn, if I wanted to hear myself play, I wouldn't have invited you over. He said that to somebody.
It was Tommy.
Was it Tommy?
Yeah.
Okay.
That was when I was telling you about that Carol told me.
Okay. Now, Blaine Chapel over there. All right. Yeah, that was Carol Rifkin telling a story about Tommy Jarrell. Somebody shows up at his party playing the fiddle, and they play exactly like Tommy, and he's kind of disturbed by it. So
his words were, ain't you got no songs of your own? Something like that.
Ain't you got no songs of your own? Yeah. Holy shit. How you doing, Blaine, on your lunch break there, buddy?
Yeah. Just hanging out on a park bench.
Cool. I'm going to try to get to another question here.
Thanks, Cliff.
Oh, yeah. Yes, sir. Okay. Hugh, you're asking, you have a question about improvisation?
Yeah, this is actually, you covered a lot of this. It was much like the previous question. Mine is more practical, though, than philosophical, which is, I'm kind of an intermediate player. And one thing that makes me an intermediate player is I really don't change it. If I play a tune 5 times in a row, it's the same every time. Yeah. And, all I can think of to do is sort of, play it slowly and consciously think to myself the second time through, okay, last time I did a slide, this time I'll do a hammer on or something.
Yeah.
Is that really how you have to approach it early on, or are there better ways to get proficient at this?
I think the way that I started out, because truth be told, I started out copying people. You know, I had mentors, Ernie Williams and George Gibson, and I copied them note for note when I first started out. And so they were sort of, and both of them, George especially, harshly guided me away from that when I was young. So, and also, even before I was harshly guided away from it, you notice there's maybe things that your teacher or the tablature or the material, the version you're working with, there's things that musician does that you don't like, right? Has you ever encountered that? Something that's either physically uncomfortable for you to do, or something that you don't like the way it sounds. Oftentimes they might, I'm trying to get this camera to focus so people can see me. Oftentimes, a banjoist will go to a full chord and you might not like the sound of the full chord. And you might start adjusting by not going to the full chord shape, because a lot of the old timey music on banjo is not done in that using full chord shapes. But anyhow, blah, blah, blah. So that's probably how I really started doing that. Like I might hear where somebody did a hammer on somewhere. I thought, boy, it would really sound kind of neater to me if I did a pull off there instead. So little stuff like really that. Yeah, it starts.
Sort of start out thinking it through.
Yeah, it's not a matter of, I don't know. Like anything, it's a matter of doing what you want. But yeah, I see what you mean. You play it's the same every time. It's very regimented. I think that's kind of a typical place to get to. Mm-hmm. You don't know what the hell you're doing at first, and then you figure out what you're doing. You find out what works, and you stick to it, and you come up with a system and a formula. Yeah, I do the same thing, and I still do it that way to some extent. Like on certain pieces of music, I have certain tunes where I've figured out the best way to do it, and that's the way I play it. But that probably maybe, I don't know, but most of my stuff is not that way, I guess. Most of the time I play it and I come up with maybe a couple different codes in my head of different formulas that I could put together to do it. But this is maybe further down the road for you. So It sounds like you're going to the right place. I mean, you're aware of it going on. You want to break the regimentation. Yeah, just work by changing it up. Yeah, if you don't, you start by stuff you don't like or that's uncomfortable to you and find ways around it. Another example, somebody would, like Ernie Williams uses a lot of drop thumbs. And before I could drop thumb, I didn't want to drop thumb. Couldn't figure it out. Couldn't fit it into my playing. So I would pluck the second string open instead of do a drop thumb. So there's all kinds of stuff like that. And that actually wound up giving me a really crazy, wacky sound to some of my early music that other people didn't have, because I wasn't drop thumbing at all. Mm-hmm. For example, millions of little things that you can do, Hugh. I'm going to move on. If you're satisfied, I'm going to move on to somebody.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
Okay. Cindy Nelson. I can tune and relative tune easily enough and have always played using tablature. Here you are, Cindy. You've always played using tablature. You never know what key you're in and what chords, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. With it would, yeah. So for example, like I have what you might call bad habits where like I never learned that stuff or a lot of that stuff. I never learned the names for chord shapes that I was using. And you'll see a lot of that in my teaching style where I'm like, I don't know what chord this is, but you make this chord, That's how the way that I was taught. The two guys that I learned from, I've mentioned already, were like masters, master banjoists, and they didn't know that stuff either. I would consider them masters. So it never was necessary to me. But at the same time, yeah, it'd be really helpful to know that stuff. But let me hear from you, Cindy. I don't want to just talk. What's going on? Well, flesh it out for me a little bit more.
Well, I was just thinking about if I chose a song that I was interested in learning, and I could do the, figure out the tune, just to figure out the notes for the tune. Then I'm trying to think about the next step. Where do I go? And kind of Hugh and Jamie have talked about that a little bit. and you've answered some questions about that.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I was just wondering, like, if I figured out a tuning that seemed to work for that, is it important that I know what tune I'm in, or that what chords are attached to that tuning? Because I won't know. And yeah, just wondered what you might say about that.
It'd be really helpful to know all that and to have this big perfect map in your mind where you've memorized all that information. I never really have like mapped it out like that. I've just kind of navigated, and like your brain lays down pathways when you go somewhere, and you're able to go there again. And then you build on that, right? It seems to me, and you branch out. And so I have these like very well-worn pathways in the noggin that get me to between tunings, and oh yeah, my hand is shaped this way when I'm tuned this way, but when I retune the banjo, you actually have to, do something else or whatever. I don't know. So all that is in the brain. It just comes with time. Of course, it will benefit you if you study like music theory and break it all down. A great resource that I have neglected mostly is Frank Converse's Banjo Tutor that came out in like 1866 or 65 or 67, I want to say. And that's a book that you can, I think it's in the public domain. I've actually found complete copies of it on the internet. And it was the first like scientific breakdown of the banjo. And that was published. And so it's, Frank Converse went over, as a professional musician doing, studying the instrument and all this music theory stuff. He put together a really interesting technical manual for the banjo. And he got everything about how to set your banjo up, about how to build a banjo is in this book. It's really, really good book. That's Frank Converse's, I don't know what it's actually called. It's like, it's called the correct banjo method, I think. Frank Converse's correct banjo method. So look that one up, get that. And if you want to start studying music theory, that's one place you could start. And
I really actually don't want to study.
You don't want to?
No. But I'm thinking that traditional players didn't know what key they were in. I mean, that's why. No. I feel like it would be helpful, but I just wonder, is it something you should really worry about?
It's not something that's like anytime I do this, it will refocus the camera. Okay, it's not something worth worrying yourself to death about. I think I encounter lots of banjoists and new students even who are into that kind of stuff, and I encourage them to learn as much as they can and to share everything that they can. But I don't, like you, I'm not a theory person. I guess I'm more left-brained ultimately, which is disappointing. But I just want to get down to the brass tacks of picking the damn thing and where did it come from and what was life like for the people who played it and so forth. And so wrapping back to another thing you said, did traditional banjo players know all that stuff? Mostly no. If I were to say no, they didn't, which was easy for me to say, I have several friends who would contradict me when I say that, and they'll say that actually you'd be surprised how much printed music and learned printed material was going around in the 1800s, even in rural areas. And so then it becomes a debate of like how much of that printed material and commercial picking technique actually made it into the rural South in the period that we're interested in, I'm interested in, which is mostly like pre-World War II picking. I would argue that it wasn't very much, and that most traditional banjo players in rural areas of the South did not know this stuff. And my main mentor, George Gibson, of course, would confirm that, where he grew up in a pretty isolated area that had a ton of banjo players. In his family, he could walk to other banjo players' houses, and they had basically no music theory knowledge. And they didn't know, they had not even, because they didn't care about the instruments very much. The instruments were not maintained. They weren't set up. Nobody had an instrument that was set up properly, for example. And it's not because these people are stupid or whatever. It's just because mainly they didn't care. The banjo was considered kind of a young person's instrument for boys and girls in that area. And I think a lot of that happened. So the instruments were not really typically set up very well. If you listen to the very early recordings, they usually sound very bad, because people just didn't know. And I don't know, I try to make a big mouthful out of that because it's cliche to just say that people were ignorant. And I don't want to give that impression, but they were kind of ignorant, you know, people today are ignorant, blah, blah, blah. Okay, Cindy,
Thanks
you got
so
is anything else on your mind?
No, thanks. I really appreciate the historical aspects that you brought out. That I think that's really important. And I'm glad you've taken the time to do that in your videos and so on. So thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Cindy. I try. Historical stuff is important. Michael, you're asking about some two-finger thumb lead picking. Are you still with us?
Yes, sir. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
All right. So my question is kind of around where do I go? So I've been playing for about a month, so I'm new. Come from a mandolin background mostly, and I started with the two-finger style, and I learned 2 songs. Right. So you know, I'm pretty much of a beginner, but you know, as I start delving into this, you start seeing like, you know, the overhand style, the two-finger thumb lead, the 3-finger style, you know, the scrug style, and then there's different tunes to learn and different tunings, and then there's singing. So like I mean, I tell you, I learned my first 2 songs. I tried to sing along, and man, that messed me all up. So my question is, you know, as far as like a learning path, I guess, you know, how many, like what would you suggest, like learning? Because right now I'm just in the standard tuning, or what people call standard tuning, and like how many tunes should I learn before I try different tunings, and how many should I learn before I try, you know, overhand style, and how many should I learn before I try to sing along, you know, that types of like because I eventually want to do all of that, you know, but I just like should I just take these 2 songs and try to play them overhand and then try to sing to them and then move on to a third, or should I learn a bunch of tunes first, I guess?
Whoa, you know, it's, you know, the spirit will move you one way or the other, right? For me, it's like when I first heard somebody two-finger picking the banjo, I was like, oh man, I have to learn to do that, right? And if you hear somebody do something that you really like, you just have to learn how to do it. And so that's a time to focus on it. In the meantime, you can just keep, you know, repetition, playing what you know over and over and over again is something that I should do more of, right? You asked in your written question, do you feel it's necessary to learn 3-finger as well? As I guess as an example of one of the things you're talking about. I encourage people to learn 3-finger. I think I would love to hear and see more traditional 3-finger pickers out there. I just tell people that I think it's really ideal to learn the overhand, you know, claw hammer approach, and to also have a finger picking style to accompany that as well. So whether that's a two-finger is just the easiest for most people. So that's what I teach. That's all I've ever done. I don't do 3-finger stuff. I started out that way and then I got away from it. So I wish I could break out, you know, some hot 3-finger style, but I've just never developed it. Y'all also heard me complain on the last chat. I've got this big blocky middle finger, and I actually have a hard time picking with my middle finger. So I don't know. So I like to just, you know, 2-finger pick me. But, you know, this is another one of those deep questions that the answer to it really is do both. Just go at your own pace. You're going to, if you're already sick and tired of the material that you've been covering, the same, you know, this one tuning and one handful of tunes and one style that you play, if you're sick of it and you've, you know, that's break out, learn something else, you know, and you say you're learning 2-finger. Yeah, I would just focus on that. I don't know. For me, when I was doing these things, as a kid, my brain was different. I would just laser focus in on stuff in a way that I can't anymore. But I still think that's probably a good way to do it. And so laser focus in on just like one thing. I mean, to this day, I mean, if I learn a new tune, I will play that tune 100 times in a day. Like if you guys see me, if I upload a video on YouTube, and if it's a piece of music that I didn't know like a week ago, and if I just learned it and uploaded it, I guarantee you the day that I recorded that video, I played that damn tune at least 200 times before I took the camera to the woods to record it. And you can ask my wife, she fucking hates it. But so that's just what I do. I laser focus in. It did a lot better when I was a youngster, but laser focus in on something until you know it forward and backward ad nauseum, and you're sick and tired of it. And I don't know, for me, I would like burn myself out on that little technique or subject that I was laser focused on. And then I'd be compelled to break out and try to do something else. But a lot of the joy of it is just being really good at one little thing too. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. I don't know. It's up to you, Michael.
And just kind of an ancillary to that, is that kind of, because reading about some of this, like different areas seem to have different styles, and different people within those areas have different styles, that type of thing. Is it pretty common for like, the old timers to, have more than one style, and maybe, play, overhand for a while, then two finger for a while, then back to the overhand, and they just kind of like learn different ways of doing it? Or was it like, in this little, because I'm from Tennessee, so like in Tennessee we do things this way, and in North Carolina they do things that way, and then now it's just because we're, a global whatever, that it's all kind of just become muddled? Or is that?
Well, it was, I think we today try to organize things and understand things. And one of the ways we do that is by saying things were done, this is the way, this is Tennessee style, this is East Kentucky style, this is Round Peak. And it really was not that way. And you asked if it was common for the old tradition bearers to have more than one style. Answer is yes. And that's why I introduce the course. I introduce you to these two main families, and I try to teach them to you both at the same time. I don't think of them even as different. To me, I just kind of back and forth, whatever, it's just playing the banjo. And I think that is closer to the traditional mindset. One reason we don't have a lot of historic terminology for the way the banjo was played is that people just didn't care. They didn't have a name for it. They just called it playing the banjo. But you can read George Gibson's material if you actually read like all the texts that George has put out about his childhood and his youth, and also the studying, the research that he's done since he was a youth. He notes that it's pretty common for old traditional banjo picker to be able to have a down picking style and an up picking style, and to be able to do both. There's obviously very many traditional players who just had one thing. And that's what they did. Ed Teague was a great two-finger Georgia banjo picker. He played everything that I've ever seen him do, same one style. You had Rudell Thomas up in East Kentucky, who was unfortunately brutally murdered just a few years ago. Rudell had one tuning and one style. It was a very weird tuning that nobody else uses, and he played a straight up-picking style with his hand flying. Mm-hmm. And Rudell was great. Like you sitting there, I have a video of Rudell Thomas on my YouTube channel. Everybody should look him up. Watch that video if you haven't. It's like an hour-long interview with him. He doesn't really want to talk. He mostly wants to pick, and he has one tuning and one style, and a bunch of songs. But maybe we don't want to get that extreme, But yeah, I think most old timers could, and you notice there's a lot of different flavor variation between down picking and up picking. A lot of times, more often than not, the down picking style is referred to as a hoedown style, dance style, because that's the loudest thing they could do. They're beating on the drum head of the banjo. You're just striking out a rhythm. But the two-finger style, to the way that I do it, the way that I see it, it's two-finger style is a little more subtle, right? It's a little more detail-oriented, and it draws out maybe more of the emotion, more of the subtler emotions in the music. I'm getting a little touchy-feely here. But when I go to sing a really intricate ballad or something, I typically 2-finger pick it. I'm not going to overhand pick it. And when I want to play upbeat, rowdy dance music, drinking alcohol kind of music, you know, that's overhand style. So just to give you an example, and I think that's where a lot of that comes from. And a lot of times you see that 2-finger style is really nice at accompanying a ballad, and the overhand down picking style is really best for accompanying dance, some kind of rhythm. I don't know.
Appreciate it.
Yeah. All right. I'm gonna go on. Thank you, Michael. Jay Savage says, "Do we have to do the boom chicka?" Just real quickly, no, you don't. I think I already covered that. Boom chicka is just kind of what it's built on. You don't have to.
Yeah, you did. I appreciate that. Thank you. Yeah.
Okay. Cool. People, and this is one we need to cover. Jonathan is asking about fingernail issues. I'm gonna try to pull you up. Jonathan might have left. So the fingernail issue, yeah, y'all. So Jonathan says, do you have any suggestions for people who love playing claw hammer but have weak nails? I do. So nylon strings. Nylon strings is the way to go if you have weak nails. Is anybody else having problems with weak fingernails? I know this is a common problem.
I used to when I used steel strings.
Yeah, and Blaine, you switched to nylon, you kind of got over it?
Yeah, I just like the way they sounded better, but I remember it would just start digging into my nails and then start ripping them off. So yeah, there was no need to be playing steel if I wanted to keep fingernails. That was for sure.
Yeah, I do not. I keep my fingernails short because if I have a fingernail that comes out over the tip of the meat, something will happen to it. I don't know if you can, but you can see I don't have any kind of picking nail there. But I don't have much of a problem even on steel strings. I guess I have thick fingernails, but anybody that's having fingernail issues, go to nylon strings, down tune that puppy. If you really want to use steel strings, use light gauge steel strings and down tune. Other than that, and there is all these products and stuff that you can stick on it to reinforce your nail. I've got one laying around. Joel Hooks actually is reproducing a historic banjo pick called a banjo thimble. So I know you guys should all know this website I talk about all the time, but banjothimble.com. If you go to banjothimble.com, you can get Joel Hooks's banjo bridges, it's like nice 2-legged bridge. But he also sells banjo thimbles. So if anybody's having a fingernail problem, or if you just want to experiment down picking with a pick, get that thimble from him. They work there. That's the best down picking finger pick that I've found. Also, y'all, incidentally, I got that a mute that he makes too. I don't know if I put pictures of this up on social media. There's this little mute in here. It's kind of neat. And depending on, you can slide it anywhere and get different tones and stuff. But for something like this, I thought it would be nice to mute the banjo a little bit. So Kevin has an interesting question about the banjo being used during travel across the United States before 1900. Do I have any historical texts about that? Yes. I didn't include this in the course. Anybody who emails me, I'll send you an unabridged copy of George Gibson's article that was in that book, Banjo Roots and Branches. So hopefully everybody here has a copy of Banjo Roots and Branches. I recommend purchasing that book. And one of the, there's many good articles in it. George Gibson has an article in that book. I have an unabridged copy of that. I'll email it to you if you want. I couldn't include that in that like bonus free course material because it's in the book and he wants to sell the book. He doesn't want to give it away for free. But I've got that article. In that article, George basically outlines every sighting of the early banjo in the South. And he can trace, he has dates and locations. So yeah, he has, you have these early sightings, easily pre-1900. George is really mostly interested in like pre-1800, definitely pre-1900. There's a great account of a wagon train that was coming from Appomattox, Virginia, going over the mountains to settle in Kentucky. This was in 1781. George describes this in the article. And they had slaves with them who played the banjo. And when they got to the top of the mountains, they were exhausted. And some of the women and the kids, they said, were crying. And they made the slaves play the banjo to cheer up these crying kids. That's in 1781 on the Virginia-Kentucky border. So that's an amazing, and there you go. I mean, talk about traveling across the United States pre-1900. There's more accounts. They're few and far between. Most of them are not about travelers. I think most people traveling probably didn't have banjos with them, right? But there's an 1820s account of a banjo being played in a little shack in the woods in Indiana. There's several accounts from Arkansas that I've seen that are 1830s. That's pretty early stuff. One of the earliest white banjo players we know about was Robert McAlpin Williams, and he played the banjo in Texas in the 1820s. He was from Georgia, so he traveled with the banjo, I guess. Anyhow, blah, blah, blah.
Great, yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Oh, William, you said you're in Wales, and when a fretted cheap Epiphone banjo, when you fret it at the third string, it sounds a bit too sharp. So that's going to go down to your banjo setup where you've got your bridge set. And it helps with everybody's banjo does that. No matter what, that third string is like never in tune. So I don't know if you've noticed this or not, but the third string is like almost never in tune. So people make all these compensated bridges and stuff to try to get around that. The easy poor man's way to get around that, which I've showed you in videos in the past, is you just kind of, you tilt your bridge is not square to the strings. You notice mine is angled slightly. So you do that. That takes, if you get depending on that, adjust that angle, that will take some of the sharpness, it'll contribute to it or take it away. You could do that. You can experiment with compensated bridges. You'll notice I don't mess with compensated bridges. I just use a straight bridge, and I just kind of fiddle with it and see if you can get that away. It's probably not the frets on your banjo's frets are probably laid out fine. If it's a modern cheap banjo, I mean, they lay those out, and they're like laser cut or something. I don't think your frets are off. It's just a matter of your bridge placement. And you need to accept some level of deficiency in your third string, because that's the way that all banjos are. Third string is like never perfect.
Thanks. I'll give that a try.
Cool. Chris has a question about Roscoe Holcomb. Any insight into the basic lick he's using for Hills of Mexico? Chris, are you still with us? I know I'm way behind on questions.
I am, yeah.
Oh, cool. I see you. Let's pin you and see if you can give me some more detail on this. So his lick that he's using.
Yeah. So the way I'm playing it right now is just the basic melody. Yeah. Which is nice, but I was kind of, looking into recordings for extra things to do, but I don't know if you know exactly what he's doing with the recording that's available on YouTube. I don't know where it's from, but it sounds a little bit different to me. Like, I tried listening to it slow, and I think maybe there's a drop thumb in there, but
I have not listened to that recording in several years, the actual source recording. I mean, I learned it from that recording, but I have not listened to that recording in a long time. If I'm not mistaken, he's using some kind of percussive technique where sounds like he's striking the banjo head in that. Am I mistaken? Is there some kind of, does it sound like he's hitting the banjo head in there?
Could be. I thought it sounded kind of like a boom chicka 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 boom, like almost type thing. Like,
well, yeah, Roscoe does. Yeah, he does that a lot. Where, yeah, it's like a boom chicka chicka. I know what you're talking about. Where it'll be like a. See if I can recreate some of that. I try to do that kind of. Yeah. Something like that, where he's going back and. That's it. Is it something like that where he's?
Yeah, I think that's it. Sorry, my internet cut out for a second. So is that just throwing in a drop thumb, just like every other time or something like that?
Yeah, what you've got there is if this is an 8-count rhythm, stand up. If this is doing an 8-count rhythm here. All right, hopefully, does he have his pants on? So what I'm doing there to get that effect is you're typically doing a boom chicka, boom chicka. To get that effect, you're dropping that first boom chicka into a boom chick. So you're just doing a boom chick, and then you're doing that 4-count drop thumb lick. So it's like a boom chick, dick it. I think that's more or less what he's doing. I don't do it exactly like him, of course.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I think that'll help. He's just playing it real fast too. I think adds to the confusion.
And he plays extremely fast, which is unusual. There's not a lot of old-timey traditional banjoists who play as fast as him. The only other person I can think of a couple. If you got, wish I could share these. You can go on the certain websites. There's a guy named Coy Morton. I think I still have the recordings of Coy Morton up on the YouTube channel. Coy Morton was a traditional, I think he's a 2-finger picker. He played like lightning. He didn't sing. Coy was blind and had throat injury from drinking bad liquor. So Coy couldn't see and he had a throat injury. His voice was real sharp. He didn't sing, but he played like lightning. And I would even think that his picking is actually, I think, more technically impressive than Roscoe's. Roscoe's kind of gets all over the place sometimes, but Coy was like real steady and really intricate and really loud and really fast. Coy Morton. So C-O-Y and then Morton, like the salt company. There's another banjo player. These guys, you can find both of these guys on the Alan Lomax Kentucky Recordings website. So Alan Lomax Kentucky Recordings. You can look up Coy Morton. You can look up this other guy. His name is George Shortbuckle Rourke. His nickname was Shortbuckle. If you look up George Shortbuckle Rourke on that Kentucky website recording, he plays extremely fast too. He does a version of hook and line that is the most repetitive, hypnotic hook and line I've ever heard. It's just one lick played over and over and over again, extremely fast and extremely accurate. And that's George Shortbuckle Rourke, I think is his name. They call him on the website, George Rourke. And that recording, I almost wonder if it's not a speed issue with the recording, if the tape was recording at the wrong speed, because that son of a bitch is fast. But typically people don't play as fast as Roscoe.
Can I ask a technical question? Once you write something on chat, how do you get it to record? What do you do? I wrote it, but I can't get it to...
You hit the enter button, and if you got an enter button, it'll go in. I don't know what you're using there, Ed, but there you go. It just came through. There is a banjoist on YouTube.
All right. Well, that's good. I was a lawyer, so I can't figure out this stuff.
Well, yeah, we won't try to hold that against you. A banjoist on YouTube whose name on YouTube is LNP292, who says is real good or something. One of the best banjoists you've heard. I've never heard of him. I'll look him up. Let's see. We'll just go to a gallery view if anybody else, we'll wrap this up here in a few minutes. If anybody else has got something, holler at me. Let's talk.
Well, my question was, there's a guy on banjoist on YouTube called, he identifies himself as LNP292.
Yeah.
And boy, can he play. And I don't know whether you've ever seen him or not, but
I haven't, Ed. I wrote it down on a note here. I'm going to check him out. What style does he play?
Well, he plays, I think it's like 2-finger mostly, but he can play just about anything. Boy, is he good. Almost.
Oh, yeah.
You are.
I'm going to look him up. On that note, y'all, it's been about an hour. I'm going to close this one out. email me if you got anything going on. You want to contact me directly, holler at me on the email. Any other way on any of them social media platforms, I'll get back to you. And thanks a lot, y'all. We'll see you in a week.
Thanks. Bye.
Thanks,
Peace.
Thanks.
Bye, everybody.
Everybody have a good day.
Thanks. Bye to everyone.
Thank you.